Hi, this is Ali Arango of Little Guy CGI, and today I would like to show you how to rig the robot mode of a transforming robot in Blender 2.79. So let's get started. Okay, if this is your first time in Blender, I recommend you go to File, User Preferences, go to Input, and then choose Select with left click. Blender's default select is with right click, and this may confuse you if you're coming from Adobe programs or other 3D programs. Also, while you're in here, click on Add-ons, and then scroll down and make sure you have a check mark next to Rigify. Okay, what you see in front of you is the result from another tutorial that I did. The current tutorial you're looking at is actually part 4. So there's a part 1, part 2, as well as a part 3, and those different tutorials lead up to what you see right here. What we're going to do today is to put a rig into our transforming robot, and our transforming robot's currently in robot mode. And what this rig will allow you to do is to enable your transforming robot to walk around, to do things like running, punching, kicking. So that is the goal of this current tutorial. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is look to your left, and actually I didn't say this. Go to File, User Preferences, go to Add-ons. Make sure you have a check mark right here where you see 3D View, 3D Navigation. And if you do that, you'll have this Display tab right here. So with this Display tab right here, what you want to do is click Front. And we want to be in what's called orthographic mode. So see right here, it says Front Ortho. Orthographic mode is kind of like a blueprint mode. It's a way of almost making 3D objects look as if they were 2D. This tends to make it very easy to work in 3D. This right here is our 3D cursor for Blender. In Blender, wherever those 3D cursors at is where objects tend to come into Blender at. We want this 3D cursor to be right in the center of our scene, and to do that, we can hold Shift, and while holding Shift, press C. Okay, so now our 3D cursor is right in the center of our scene, and that is good because that's what we want. You guys who have watched the other parts of this tutorial, let me know what you think of my microphone. I got a new microphone. There was issues before with the microphone not being very loud, so hopefully this will solve those issues. So, okay, with our 3D cursor in the center of our scene, what we want to do is hold Shift. While holding Shift, press A. This brings up our Add To menu. We then want to look at the options that popped up for Armature, and we're going to select Human Meta Rig. Okay, when we did that, doesn't look like anything happened. Mainly because our armature came in fairly small. We looked at this window here. This is our outliner window over to the upper right. We can look here and see that Meta Rig is selected, and that's what we just brought in. Okay, so with that selected, what we want to do is click on our puppeteer button. It looks like a little person. We're going to left click there. Then we're going to look down to where we see display, and we're going to put a check mark next to X-ray. And then here, it's kind of hard to see there. I'm going to roll the mouse wheel to zoom in. I'm going to hold Shift and the middle mouse button to pan up. You can see this little armature right here. So what I want to do is push this down. And I'm basically pushing this down to line up with the bottom of our transforming robot. Once I have that there, what I'm going to do now is press S to scale. And after I press S, I'm just pulling my mouse out. I left clicked, I'm pressing S, and then pulling out again, S, pulling out again. And what I'm doing is I'm looking at the shoulders, right? So I'm going to left click here. So I look at the shoulders here, I look at the shoulders here, and I'm like, okay. So that was the main thing I was looking at as I scaled up our armature. Okay, with our armature selected, what we're going to do is look towards object mode near the bottom of the screen. We're going to left click on one of the two triangles, then we're going to select edit mode. Currently, we can see our armature as well as our mesh. For what we're about to do here, I think it will be easier if we just looked at our armature. So we look to the top left of our screen. We see view global/local. I'm about to click this, and when I do that, the mesh is going to look like it disappears. When I say the mesh, I'm talking about the transforming, robot. So I'm going to left click, and basically what happened is, you look here, this says front ortho local. We're currently in local mode. Our transforming robot mesh is still there. However, currently Blender, while being in local mode, is just allowing us to focus right on what we're currently working on, which is our armature. And then you would just click view global/local to get out of local mode and get back to global mode where you can see the rest of your objects. So I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to hover here, hold shift, press B, draw a zoom box to zoom in. And then what we want to do is get rid of these extra bones right here. These are bones we're not going to use. These are meant to help with animating a face. We're not going to use them, so we're just going to get rid of them. So I'm going to press A to deselect everything. I'm going to click this bone here. Oh, I'm trying to click it. There we go. I'm going to press H to hide that bone. There's another bone that was pretty much inside of the other bone. I'm going to click here, press H. I'm just doing this so I have a clear view of these bones so I can get rid of them more easily. I'm now going to look towards the bottom of the screen. I'm going to left click, and then I'm going to go from solid mode, which we're currently into, wireframe mode. I went to wireframe mode so that we could select the front as well as the back of all the bones and anything that isn't facing are facing towards us as well. So I'm going to hold control, hold the right mouse button. I'm drawing a lasso select and just selecting all these bones that we want to remove. I'm going to press X. This brings up our delete menu, and then going to choose delete bones. I'm now going to go back near the bottom, click, and then select solid view. I'm going to hold shift and the middle mouse button to pan up. I'm going to press Alt, and while holding Alt, press H to bring back our previously hidden bones. I'm now going to press A to deselect. Okay, in Blender, you can hold shift to select more than one bone. So I'm going to click here, hold shift, then click here. And then I'm going to press X to bring up our delete menu. I'm then going to choose delete bones. I'm now going to roll the mouse wheel to zoom back. I'm going to hold shift and the middle mouse button to pan up. I'm going to click here, hold shift, and then click here. Not there. And then with these two bones selected, I'm going to press X to bring up the delete menu, then choose delete bones. I'm going to hold shift and the middle mouse button to pan up. And then I'm going to click here, hold shift, and click here. Then press X to bring up our delete menu, and then choose delete bones. I'm going to zoom back. And now that we have this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to global mode. We need to align this armature with our robot mesh. As a matter of fact, before I do that, hold shift and middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to click here, press H to hide. And this bone right here, we don't need. So I'm going to press X, choose delete. Then I'm going to hold Alt, press H to bring back that bone. I'm going to press A to deselect. We're currently in local mode. That's why we can't see our robot mesh. So we're going to select view global/local. And now we can see our robot mesh because we are back in global mode. Okay, we want to have things so that when we move our armature on one side, the other part of the armature moves as well. So what we're going to do is look to options. Currently we're in edit mode. It's important in Blender when you're working to realize what mode you're in. So we are in edit mode of our armature. Okay, so we look towards options, and then we see this thing that says armature options, and then X mirror underneath here, or X axis mirror. So we're going to put a check mark there. And what this does is this is going to allow us to, whatever we move on one side will be moved on the other side. The first thing I want to do is I want to take this arm and basically have it come up so it's more closely matching this. Probably the easiest way to do this is to press C, select our bone. C is paint select, by the way, for Blender. If you roll your mouse wheel one way, you'll shrink your paint select. If you roll it the other way, you'll make the paint select area get bigger. Then you can right click to get out of paint select. What I'm going to do is, remember that 3D cursor we talked about? I'm going to right click here. I'm specifically putting this 3D cursor right here, right on the joint. And the reason why I'm doing that is we're going to just rotate this up. But before we do that, we have to change our pivot point options. So your default Blender pivot point is set for the medium point. We want to change this to our pivot, this being our pivot point options, to the 3D cursor. So we're going to click here, select 3D cursor. So what that means is basically this arm will, rotate from this 3D cursor now. So now we can press R to rotate and then bring our arms straight up. And because there are x-axis mirror is turned on here, the other arm does the same. So now I'm going to press A to deselect. Okay, our arms aren't perfectly aligned. This is fine for now. What we're going to do is press C for paint select. Select the bottom part of the leg. It's not paint selecting, so I'm right-clicking paint select. I'm holding shift. I held shift so I could select more than one bone at a time. And currently our 3D cursor is up here because it's set for our manipulator is on our 3D cursor, because our pivot point is set for our 3D cursor. So what we want to do is click here, go back to our default pivot point, which is the medium point, and now we can see our manipulator, which is this blue red object here that we use to move things, is right where we need it to be. So we're just going to pull to the side here, and we're just matching up this line with the robot, right there in the back. We're going to click the top. We left clicked here because we left clicked there. We deselected these bones here. We're going to pull this out to the side. We're just matching this up. We're just push down. We're matching this up with the bones. Not the bones, with the legs themselves. Okay, so now what we can do that we did that, we'll press A to deselect. We'll press C for paint select, and we'll select this arm here. All that. And we can see that this isn't quite right as far as the height is what I'm looking at. See this line right here? So we're going to take the manipulator and push down. So now it looks pretty well lined up. We're going to press A to deselect. I'm going to hold Control and the middle mouse button to get a smooth zoom in. I'm going to hold Shift and the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to pull this out. So I'm going to press B for box select. Left click and drag around this hand. And then I'm going to pull this out. And I'm pulling this out, looking at the tips of the fingers here, matching up with the tips there. Now I'm looking at the wrist. I'm going to click here. The wrist is going to be around there, so I'm pushing this back. I'm now looking at where our elbow joint's at. I'm going to click here, pull that out. We're just matching this up. Now we see the shoulder joint, right? So for this, I'm going to press A to deselect. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate. What we want to do is move both this and this at the same time. So I'm going to click here, hold Shift, click there. So I have the end of this bone as well as that. And I'm going to go to display, click front, and I'm looking at right here. So I want to drag this from here to here. So it's right here now that I'm looking at it. I think right here is good. What we're doing is I'm going to press A to deselect. We're thinking about where these bones need to be to make this animate well and animate easily. As I was growing up, I was a huge fan of a Japanese anime called Robotech, and have liked mech stuff before then, and since then. I just recently saw Pacific Rim, the second one, and I enjoyed it because it was a mech movie. So yeah, I like dealing with mechs, like rigging with mechs. So I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate to see how this looks from the side. And you can see from the side, this looks good. This looks pretty good. Our leg is out though. So I'm going to hold Shift and the middle mouse button to rotate. What I'm going to do is I'm going to press B for box select and select right here. I'm going to pull this back like that. And when we're dealing with rigging, we want to have a little bend. Basically what you want to do when you're rigging is you want to have a bend in your joints where your joints are bending to kind of tell Blender how they should bend. So you want to push this forward like that so that Blender can kind of see, oh, you want the leg to kind of bend back like that. It's like, okay. Okay, so the legs look pretty decent. We're going to click this front. Hold Shift, hold Control the middle mouse button. There's a little tip right there. I clicked that, now I'm pushing that forward, just matching that up here. I'm holding the middle mouse button to rotate, just taking a look. I'm going to press A to deselect. Okay, I'm holding the mouse button to rotate. One of the things that we want to do is have enough room so that our foot can bend as it walks. I think it adds a lot to an animation. I'm holding the middle mouse button as I rotate. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to object mode. We're going to click on our mesh. We're going to go into edit mode. And what we're going to do is I'm going to hover here. I'm going to press L. I'm going to press H to temporarily hide that. And what I want to do is grab this part of our leg here. I'm clicking here to see if we had a mirror modifier, and we do. So whatever we do to this leg will happen to this leg. We want to give some more length to this leg. So what we're going to do is press, and if, by the way, if this armature is like in your way, remember we have this view global / local, we can click there. Now we're in the local mode of our robot mesh. So now we'll press Z, we'll go to wireframe, and we'll hold control, hold the right mouse button, and we're selecting this bottom part of the leg. We are also on face select, which is important. When I press Z, I could have also clicked here and selected wireframe. So now I'm going to select solid. And what we want to do with this is push down. Okay. Yeah, actually this should be fine. So we'll push down. That should be good. If you look here at the size of this gear here, and just this is a little bit, this space right here is how I'm kind of like looking at this. This space here isn't equal to that, but this is kind of like a decent judge. I'm going to press A to deselect. I'm going to hold Alt, and while holding Alt, I'm going to press H to bring back our other geometry. And now that basically this should give us just enough room so that our foot can flex as our character is walking. So I'm going to press A to deselect. Then I'm going to go to here where we say view global / local, select to go back to global mode. And now I'm going to left click near the bottom, select object mode, click on our armature, and then I am going to click near the bottom, object mode, and then go back to edit mode. So now we're back in the edit mode of our armature bone. And now that we did that, we can see that we have to readjust this again. It's not that big of a deal. But yeah, this should definitely work out better for us. Okay, so we're going to left click here, hold shift, and click here. We're going to push this down. And one of the things when you're thinking about rigging and animations, pushing that forward some, you definitely want to think about how the foot is going to bend, because it definitely, particularly with deal with mechs, I think it adds a lot. So holding with a mouse, but I'll just move this up some. Now I'm going to press A to deselect. I'm going to roll the mouse wheel to zoom back. Click here and move this up some. I'm going to press A to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hold shift and the middle mouse button to pan down. So now I'm looking at our arm. I think the arm can go down a little bit lower, so I'm going to press C for paint select. Select here, right click. Push down slightly. I'm going to press A to deselect. For our head bone, I'm going to hover here, hold shift. While holding shift, press B, draw a zoom box to zoom in. What we want to do is click here. We can push this down. I'm trying to push these bones down to get that top bone basically inside of our head. So I'm pushing this back. I like to have the bone, typically the top bone, come from around the neck towards the front of the head. click here, pull this back. So what you're thinking about here is how your head is going to turn. So we really can't see the neck of our character. So I'm going to click here. And see how it's hard to see the head right here? Like we turn to the side, we have all this geometry blocking us. What we can do is, I believe it's Alt-B. Hover here, hold Alt, press B. No, it's not Alt-B, okay. Whoa. Okay, my screencast is on, so that's stopping me. I see that's activating instead. So what I'm going to do is I'll temporarily turn off the my screencast key so you can see. This is pretty useful to know. Okay, the screencast keys are temporarily turned off. I'm going to press A to deselect. So we're trying to see the head. We have all this geometry in the way, right? What we can do is hover here, hold Alt, while holding Alt, press B. We'll draw a box right around, our head. It doesn't have to be perfect. Now when we turn to the side, we see just the head and the other geometry is not in the way. And this is a very cool, very useful. The geometry is still there. Blender is just making it far easier for us to, see what's actually going on. And this looks good for the head. From the front, it looks like this is pretty high, this little part of the bone right there. But from this place, it looks that looks fine to me. Though we can see here, we can take this, pull this back. Okay, so to get out of this mode, I'm going to press A to deselect. We just hold Alt, press B again. Now the rest of our geometry comes back. So I'm going to click here, move that like that. I'm going to press A to deselect. Okay, so I'm zooming back so we can take a look. And pretty good. We need to set up the fingers. Again, very important. Dealing with the mech. I'm going to grab here, push that down. So I'm see how there's a little bend in here. That should be fine. So let's zoom in here. So basically with the fingers, this is how I like to do things. I'm actually going to, I found this to be pretty effective. I'm going to, not there. Hovering here, I'm going to press L to select there. I'm going to press I'm going to press X, and then this brings up our delete menu. I'm going to choose delete bones. I'm going to select here. I'm going to press L. L basically when you hover over something in Blender. I'm just selecting all of these bones except for this one here. L allows you to select most of the time an entire object in Blender. So now with those bones selected, I'm going to press X to bring up our delete menu. Then I'm going to choose delete bones. And what I found is, you might say, why are you doing that? I found that it's easier to set up one finger and then just duplicate these bones. So that's what I tend to do. So now I'm adjusting this. Here's our wrist. And just, rotating Blender or whatever 3D program. A lot of times you're going to have to rotate your view to see what's going on. Okay, so now with this left here, I'm going to press L. I'm hovering over there, pressed L. Now I'm pressing L here. So I'm going to push this over like this. And I want this bone should be second. Yeah. So we want this, all of these bones to match up where they should be. So we have 1, 2, 3 section, right? So we want this section here to be in between. All right. So now that we have that lined up, we should be able to duplicate. I'm going to press A to deselect. Okay, this bone we don't need, so I'm going to press X and then select delete bones. I'm going to hover here, press L, and then I'm going to hold shift and then press D. That's a way of duplicating bones in Blender. I'm going to push this up, then press R to rotate. Push this into place here. You have to typically rotate to see the view, so we can see here these don't look right. I'm going to press A to deselect, press C for paint select. We can go to front view or the graphic and press R to rotate. Put some bend in the bones. That. When we work with bones, one of the things we can do is we can click on our puppeteer button. We can click this button that says axes, and what this allows us to do is to make sure that our bones match up. So see where we have our where we have Z, this Z axis here. Our bones are going to bend down on the Z axis. The axes can change a little bit. The main thing is that your axes are consistent. So we want Z so that all of the fingers bend down towards the Z. So when we look over here, we want the thumb to bend down towards the Z. So what we can do is click here, and then we can, this is our properties panel here. Look up here, and we see this that says roll. So what we can do is left click this roll, and we have Z there. So we want Z to be facing down for the most part. So we can just click, and now Z is down. So click here, take the roll and get that Z down. Click here, take the roll to get the Z down. And then we can take this thumb bone and line this up. I've right clicked to undo that. Let's go to a right view. And when you don't roll the mouse wheel to zoom back, when you don't want your bones to roll, and typically rolling is like we wanted them to roll to make the axis go the way we wanted, but when you don't want them to roll, it's good to use orthographic views. And for your fingers to bend right, they need to be set up so that again the axis is consistent. Okay, so now that's done, we'll press A to deselect. We'll click here to turn off the axes. Just hold the middle mouse button to take a look. Okay, now what we're going to do is rotate the view. I'll go to a top view. And I'm going to hover here, press L, and then I'm going to hold shift, press D, then right click. I duplicated, then I've right clicked to keep these bones in the same spot. When I take this manipulator and pull this to the side, because I'm in an orthographic view, our bones shouldn't roll. I'm going to hold shift, press D, right click to get the bones to stay in position. Then I'm going to take the manipulator and move these bones to the side. I'm going to hold shift, press D, right click, and then take the manipulator and move these bones to the side. I'll click the top and move them slightly towards each other. That should be good. I'll press A to deselect now. Because we had the X-axis mirror option on, what we did here was also done over here. I'm going to hold the mouse button and rotate the view. And looks good. You can click here, make this go down a little further. Press A to deselect. Shift the middle mouse button, pan. Shift the middle mouse button, pan. Hold the middle mouse button, rotate. hold the middle mouse button to rotate, taking a look. Shift the middle mouse button to pan. Shift the middle mouse button to pan, and I think we're good. Shift the middle mouse button to pan. Okay, we're going to need to add in some bones to help us control our armature. So I'm going to click here. I'm actually going to turn off this x-axis mirror. I'm going to hold shift in the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to hold control in the middle mouse button to zoom in. I'm going to click here. I'm going to press E to extrude, right click. And when I did that, I set it up so that I'm going to pull, because I just extruded, so now I can pull an extrusion bone out right there. Let me push that in. It doesn't have to be that long. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to our display tab, select the right view. I'm going to click here. I clicked here. I'm going to press A. I clicked here because we're in Blender where your 3D cursor is at, is where objects tend to come into Blender at. I'm going to hold shift, press A, and it's kind of hard to see, but here is the bone that just came in. I want this bone to go straight out, so see how we have the 3D cursor here. When we brought the bone in, this tip is selected here. We're going to hold shift, press S. We're going to choose selection to cursor offset. Looks like the bone disappeared. It really just scaled down to this 3D cursor, and with that done, we can just push straight forward. So now we have we have this bone here, and we want to push this down so that this bone is underneath, and we'll take this bone and pull that back something like that. When we rotate, we can see that this bone is not centered. Like, we want this right underneath, so we'll just push that to center, and then we rotate to make sure it's actually in the place. I'm going to hold shift and the mouse button to pan. I'm going to press A to deselect. Okay, now what we're going to do is left click here. Okay, rotating. There we go. Rotate again by holding the middle mouse button. I'm going to hold shift. So we selected both of these two bones. I'm going to hold shift. While holding shift, I'm going to press S. This brings up our snap to menu. I'm going to choose cursor to selected. Because both these bones were selected, Blender put the 3D cursor right in the center of both of these bones. I'm going to press A to deselect. I'm then going to hold, hold shift, press A, and I brought in this bone right here. I want this bone to go straight forward, so I'm going to hold the mouse button, rotate. So what I'm going to do is hold shift, press S, and then I'm going to choose selection to cursor offset. Looks like the bone disappeared. It just scaled down to the 3D cursor. Now I can take this green manipulator and push this bone straight out like that. I'm going to click this and pull that bone back. This is going to be the bone that allows us to easily move this rig around. I'm going to press A now to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hold shift and the middle mouse button to pan. And what we want to do is we want to have a bone that's going to allow us to control these different fingers together. So I'm going to click here. I click there just so I can rotate more easily. I'm going to take this bone and I'm going to hold shift. And then while holding shift, I'm going to press D. I'm then going to right click. And then I'm going to pull that bone up. And I'm going to use this bone to basically control this entire hand. Not right now, but fairly shortly. I'm going to press A to deselect. And that should be the bones that we need. We need, I believe, one more, but for now we are good as far as bringing in our bones. Okay, when you rig things, one of the things with rigging is when you attach the rig to the actual mesh, and you're able to move the mesh with the rig. However, when you do that, one of the things with rigging is you want to be able to have your rig animate easily. So one of the things that we do is we set up inverse kinematics. And what that means is currently we grab the waist bone here and push down, our entire mesh would go down. We want to have things so that when we grab here, push down, that our character bends down, and that's inverse kinematics. We're going to set that up now. We're going to set up our this leg to work well and animate well. And then we're going to use a method in Blender to or use Blender's ability to basically duplicate this to the other side. So we're going to spend the work doing here, and then it's going to go over to that other side. It's a decent amount of work. So this is nice to use. So what we're going to do is, the first thing we want to do is we want to select here. For inverse kinematics to work correctly, we need to unparent this bone from here. So to do that, we're going to make sure we know we're in edit mode, because we tend to unparent, parent, unparent as well as parent in edit mode. And we tend to set up constraints in pose mode. So we're currently in edit mode. So we're going to hold Alt. While holding Alt, we're going to press P. This brings up our clear parent menu. We're going to select clear parent. Okay, now with that done, we're going to press A to deselect. We're in edit mode. We're now leaving edit mode. We're going to click here. We're going to go to pose mode. Here in pose mode, we're going to first click on this bone that we just unparented, hold shift, and then while holding shift, we're going to click on this shin bone here. So let's just let go of shift. With that done, I'm going to hold shift, and then while holding shift, I'm going to press I. This brings up our add IK menu. We're going to select to active bone. So now we have an IK on this bone here. I'm going to press A to deselect. Actually, I'm going to reselect this bone. What we need to do to have this work right is there's something called a chain length. When we look to this bone right here with the little chain next to it, we see this thing that says chain length. The chain length is set for 0. Typically, when you're dealing with a humanoid character, you want to set this chain length to 2. So we're going to take this up to 2. The reason why we're doing this is so that our leg basically works from here down, if that makes sense. So it's like here is either control, then here's 1, then 2, and then the leg will bend right here. Now before we bend this, we need to parent this bone here to this bone. So you tend to set up constraints in pose mode, which we're currently in, and we parent bones in edit mode. So what we're going to do is press A to deselect. We're then going to left click here, select edit mode. Here in edit mode, we're going to click this bone first. The order is important. We're going to hold shift and then click this bone second. And then with that done, I let go of shift. I'm going to hold control, press P. This brings up our make parent menu. I'm then going to choose keep offset. And now with that done, I'm going to press A to deselect. I'm going to then left click near the bottom and then select pose mode. And then when I click here, this handle, and I press G, you can see how this leg is now moving, and it's set up for us to fairly easily animate. In addition to that, with this bone, I can press R to rotate on the X axis and have control having this bone, be able to rotate. I'm going to right click. I'm going to press A to deselect. Now when I click here, I can press G, and you can see that the character bends down. And again, we're focusing on this leg because we're going to do the work on this leg and then copy it over to the other side. So I'm going to press A to deselect. Okay, we're going to go to edit mode. I'm going to hold shift and mouse button to pan up. I'm going to hover here, hold shift, press B, draw a zoom box right here. We need to parent this bone to this bone and then parent this bone to this bone. So we're going to left click here first, hold shift, then click here. I let go of shift, I'm holding control, pressing P, and then our make parent menu pops up. I'm going to select keep offset. We're going to press A to deselect. We need to parent this bone to this bone. I'm going to click here, hold shift. While holding shift, click here. I let go of shift. I'm going to hold control. While holding control, I'm going to press P. This brings up our make parent menu. I'm going to select keep offset. I'm then going to press A to deselect. I'm going to zoom back. We need to make it so that this bone doesn't pull away from this bone. To do that, we're going to left click near the bottom. We're going to select pose mode, and we're going to click this bone first. The order is important. Hold shift and then click this bone second. I'm letting go of shift. Now I'm going to press and hold shift. I'm pressing and holding control. Now I'm pressing C. This brought up our add constraints with targets menu. I'm about to click copy location. I didn't click it yet. When I click this, that bottom foot bone is going to jump up. So prepare yourselves. I just clicked it. You can see that now with that copy location, this bone jumped up. And what we need to do is get this bone back down. So we look to where we see our bone constraints menu. It looks like a bone with chains, or looks like a bone with a chain on it. See where it says head, tail? We're just going to take this slider and move this over. And now this is back in the correct spot. So I'm going to press A to deselect. Now I'm going to left click and then select edit mode to go back to edit mode. Okay, we need to duplicate these two bones. It's important that we select both of these bones together. So we selected that first, hold shift, select this bone. We're now going to hold shift, press D, and then right click. And now these two bones are duplicated. They're right on top of each other, but there are now not two bones, which is what it looks like you're looking at. There's actually 4 bones. All right, so when we have an object on top of another object in Blender, when you click that object, I pressed A to deselect, so I'm going to click here. See, it says foot.L directly underneath that. Totally right on top of it is the duplicate, so we'll click again, and there's that bone right there, foot.L.001. We'll click here, we'll name this foot underscore roll.L, and then press enter. So now we'll press A to deselect, we'll click here. Okay, the manipulator's in the way. If this manipulator gets in your way, you can look right near the bottom, click here to get that out of the way. And now with this selected, see that .001? .001 tends to be what Blender names things that are duplicates. So this looks just like the bone. However, this is the duplicate bone, and we can tell it's a duplicate bone because it says .001. So we're going to click here, and we're going to name this toe underscore control .L. Now, when I put that .L in there, that's important because that .L is letting Blender know which side these bones are on. So I'm going to press A to deselect. Now what we're going to do is left click and then select pose mode. We're then going to select right from our navigation menu. We're going to click on this first bone here. There it goes. Here's the name of the bone. We're going to press R to rotate. Just to separate, just so we can clearly see the bones right there. I pressed A to deselect. Okay, for this bone here and this bone, when I say this bone, I'm talking about our foot underscore roll.L bone. We need to take off the copy location constraint. The reason why this bone is green is because it has that constraint on there. So we're going to go to our bone that has the chain on it, click there, and then we're going to just select X. So now I'm going to press A to deselect. So on our duplicate bone, which is our foot underscore roll.L bone, we don't want the copy location constraint. However, we do want it on our original bone like this. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to click on this bone, which is our toe underscore control bone. We're clicking this here because with this angled up like this, we can clearly select this. We're about to go to edit mode, so let's go back to edit mode. So I click near the bottom, then I click edit mode. Now this bone is right on top of the other bone. However, it's fine because we already selected in pose mode. We know we're selected on the right bone. So now I'm going to hold shift, and then while holding shift, I'm going to click this bone. I let go of shift, then I'm going to hold control, and then while holding control, I'm going to press P. This brings up our make parent menu, and then I'm going to select keep offset. Okay, so now I'm going to press A to deselect. All right, now what we want to do is I'm going to click here, go back to pose mode. Here in pose mode, I'm going to select that foot underscore roll.L bone, the one we, that no longer has the green on it because it no longer has the copy location constraint on it. And we came to pose mode, so we can easily select that. Now we're going back to edit mode. And then edit mode is right on top of the other bone. However, it's fine, so we know we have the correct bone. So what we're going to do now is press R to rotate, 180, and then press enter to lock that in. Now the reason why I was able to rotate this bone without any axis is because we're in the right orthographic view. That's why we were able to just press R without using an axis. However, when we look at this bone, we can see that this bone is not, it's angled. See how these bones don't look angled? So we can fix that by Having this bone selected, we'll hold Control, press N. We'll select global x-axis, we'll hold Control, press N, select global y-axis, we'll hold Control, press N, then select global z-axis, and now you can see that bone is no longer rotated. So now I'm going to press A to deselect. Okay, we need to parent this bone to this bone, so I'm going to click here. I've rotated the view. I'm going to hold Shift and then select here, and Blender selected this bone. If this happens and this bone is getting your way out here, actually what you can do is I'm going to press A to deselect. I'm going to click that bone. I'm going to press H to temporarily hide it. Now I'm going to click here, hold Shift, and then while holding Shift, click here. With the bone selected in that order, I'm going to hold Control. While holding Control, I'm going to press P. And before we use Make Parent, keep offset, and we've done that. Every time we've done make parent so far, we've used keep offset. This time we are going to select connected. So now we select connected. Then I'm going to press A to deselect. Okay, now I'm going to hold Alt and then press H to bring back that bone, and I'll press A to deselect. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to click near the bottom. We're then going to go to pose mode. Here in pose mode, we're going to click near the front. We want this toe underscore control.L bone. So if you clicked it and didn't select it, you can just click again and Blender should select it, but we got it the first try. So I'm going to click right. I'm then going to press R to rotate, and I'm doing that to make this easy to select. So with that bone selected, I'm holding the middle mouse button just to make this easier to see right here. I'm going to hold Shift, and then while holding Shift, I'm clicking the original toe bone. I'm letting go of Shift, and with that done and selected in that order, the order being first the control underscore toe bone and then the original toe bone, we're going to hold Shift. While holding Shift, we're going to press I. This brings up our Add IK menu. We're going to select to active bone. Everything jumped. That is fine. We're now going to look to our bone constraints menu. So we're going to left click there. And then where we see chain length, we're going to take this chain length up to 1. And then where we see use tail, we're going to click to take away that check mark from use tail. With the bones still selected and selected in the order they were selected, we're going to hold Shift. While holding Shift, we're going to hold Control. And then while holding Control, so I'm holding Shift as well as Control. Now I'm pressing C. This brings up our Add Constraints with Targets menu. And then I'm going to select Copy Rotation. And then I'm going to press A to deselect. Okay, so with all that done, we're going to press A to select everything. We're going to hold Alt. While holding Alt, we're going to press R. Then we're going to press G. Now, holding Alt and press R resets the rotation of your bones. Basically, that just makes them go back to the original position that they were in when you first started, setting up your rig. And when you hold Alt G, that resets the location. Okay, so with all of that done, I'm going to roll the mouse wheel to zoom back. Roll it again to zoom back more. I'm going to go to right view. So now I'm going to click here and I'm going to press G. And now we can see that when we push, when we move this bottom bone, our foot moves. When we click this bone right here, when we press R, our foot flexes. When we click this bone and we press R, our foot will roll back or roll forward. And that's exactly what we want. So I'm going to press A to deselect. Okay, we're going to go near the bottom. We're going to go and select Edit Mode. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. We're going to click on this bone right here. It's currently named Bone. We're going to click and change this bone to main underscore foot underscore control dot L and then press Enter. Okay, I'm going to press A to deselect. I'm going to roll the mouse wheel to zoom back. We want to select these bones so we can delete them. So we're going to hover above this ball right here. We're going to press B for box select, left click and drag. We're then going to press X to bring up our delete menu, then choose delete bones. We're going to press A to deselect that. We're then going to hover here, press B, select all of these bones right here. And I learned this from George R. I was struggling as far as copying bones, getting all the constraints and everything to move over to the other side. George R. left me a comment that said, why don't you just use Symetrisize? I was like, that's a thing. So thank you, George. I'm extremely thankful that you told me this. It makes life a lot easier. So with all of these bones selected and all of the bones on the opposite side gone, I'm going to go to Armature, go up to Symetrisize, and then left click. I'm holding the middle mouse button to rotate. Now I'm going to press A to deselect. Okay, so now what we want to do is go to pose mode and click and make sure everything's working. So this is working correctly. We click here. This is working correctly. Excellent. Click here, press R to rotate on the X-axis. Excellent. I'll click here. R to rotate, I'm going to push the X-axis. Excellent. So it looks like everything is working correctly. So now we're going to left click here, go back to edit mode. And what we want to do here is we want to click here, hold shift, and then click here, and then hold shift. Now I keep holding shift. Sorry, I'm holding shift. My finger is holding down the shift button. I'm going to click here. And now with those bones selected and this bone selected last, we still holding shift, we left click there. Now I'm finally letting go of shift, hold control, press P. It brings up our make parent menu, and then I select keep offset. I'm going to press A to deselect. The reason why I did that, now we can go back to pose mode. If we want to move our entire armature, we click here, and we press G, and you can see the entire armature moves. So I'm going to press A to deselect. Okay, let's set up these hands. We're going to hover here, hold shift, press B. We're going to draw a zoom box, zoom into the hands. We're going to click here. We're in pose mode, by the way. Click here, hold shift. While holding shift, click here. We're going to hold shift. While holding shift, hold control. While holding control, shift as well as control, we're going to press C. So I'm holding shift, holding control, and I'm pressing C. This brings up our add constraints with targets menu. We're going to select copy rotation. We're then going to look to our bone constraints menu. We're going to look where we see these two world spaces. We're going to click the first one, change this to local space. Then we're going to look to the second world space, click here and change this to local space as well. Okay, with that done, I'm going to press A to deselect, click this top bone. I'm going to press R to rotate on the Y axis, and you can see that moves that one bone there. And because these are hooked up, this bone is basically following the rotation of that bone, and then these are parented to that, so they're following. Now what we can do is press A to deselect. We'll press C, select all of these bones here. I'm just painting all of these bones. And then now that we painted, okay, now they're all selected. Now what we can do is hold shift, and then while holding shift, click this bone that has the constraint on it, and that constraint is our copy rotation. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go to pose, and we're going to go up to where we see constraints. Then we're going to go over and select copy constraints to selected bones. And then when we did that, all of these bones have that constraint on them now, which is spectacular. And it is spectacular because we can press A to deselect, click here, and press R to rotate on the Y axis. And look at that. Tell me that's not cool. So that one bone lets us, have our whole hand flex, which is great. So I'm going to press A to deselect. Okay, let's click on this bone right here. Okay, and because this bone has this .L, which should work, but let's control this to, let's change this to finger underscore control .L, and then press enter to lock that in. So we're going to press A to deselect. What we're going to do, we're currently in pose mode. We're going to left click, we're going to go to edit mode. In edit mode, what we're going to do is we're going to press B for box select. We're going to go right past the ball right there to select all of this. We're in edit mode. We're going to press X to bring up our delete menu. Then we're going to select delete bones. We're going to press A to deselect. I'm going to hold shift and middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to roll back some. And now what I'm going to do is press B for box select and then select all of these bones right here. I'm going to go down to where we see Armature. I'm going to go up towards Symetrisize. Then I'm going to left click there. Then I'm going to press A to deselect. Okay, with that done, let's go to pose mode. Make sure this works. So we click here. We press R to rotate on the Y axis and our hand flexes. We click here. Oops, I right clicked. Press R to rotate on the Y axis and our hand works well. Excellent. Okay, so right now, basically the way things are set up is we have to press, click this and then press R to rotate on the Y axis. Wouldn't it be nice if, because our hands generally just work by going one direction, we could just press R and not have to worry about pressing the X axis? Well, we can. With this properties panel set up, so we have this control bone selected. We'll scroll this up. The location, see these locks right here? We can lock things so we don't have to be concerned about this bone moving around. So let's lock the location. Even though we're locking the location, this bone will be fine as far as moving when we move the arm. We want this to be, the rotation to be locked, everything to be locked except for the X axis, which is kind of strange because we were rotating on the Y axis, but the X axis works. So now when we press R, we don't have to worry about the axis. We can just, move our mouse and this works correctly. So we'll do this same thing on the other side. We'll press hold shift and the middle mouse button to pan. We'll press A to deselect that bone. Okay, I'm going to hover here, hold shift, press B to zoom in. We'll select here, and then we're just going to lock all of these right here next to X, Y, Z, and then lock the rotation except for the X axis there. And then with that done, we press R to rotate, and there we go. Excellent. So we'll press A to deselect. We'll roll the mouse wheel to zoom back. Hold shift and the middle mouse button to pan. And hold shift and middle mouse button to pan more. Now we want to do the same thing here. Okay, so we'll select our foot underscore roll dot L bone. Scroll up. Put a lock location for all of that. And we'll lock everything but the X axis here. We'll do the same thing on the other side. So I'm locking everything but the X axis. And now when we click here, when we press R to rotate, we rotate. I'm going to right click, press A to deselect. Now I'm going to left click here. Now I'm going to press R to rotate, and we're good. So this allows us to rotate without, click here again. Yep, there we go. Just we can just press R to rotate instead of having to click and access. So I'm just taking a look, and everything looks good. Okay, now we can actually connect our armature to our mesh. Press A to select everything, A to deselect everything. We're going to left click near the bottom, then go to object mode. Oh, there is something we want to do. We're still clicked on our armature, so we're going to left click near the bottom. We're going to go back into edit mode, and basically what we want to do is there's certain bones that don't need to deform our mesh, and that is this bone here. I'm going to hold shift, these bones underneath here, these bones here, these little bones. When I say deform, these are bones that we use to control. I held the middle mouse button to rotate, holding shift to select. I held shift. You don't hold shift, you'll lose your selection. So I selected all of these bones, and the reason why I did that is these bones are bones that we don't want to deform our mesh or help our mesh to move. We use these to control our armature. So when we click here, see where it says deform here? We don't want these bones to deform. So what we can do is we could click individually, click the bone, select the form, click the bone, select the form. But there's another way, and what that way is we hold shift and then press W. And then we have this toggle bone options menu that pops up. And then we just go to the form and select the form. And with that, now all of those bones that we had selected, I'll just press A to deselect. Now they have the deform bones, the form option turned off for all of those bones, which is very nice. Okay, so now we'll go to object mode. And I'm going to hold shift and middle mouse button to pan. And what we want to do is we're going to press A to deselect. We want to select our mesh first, then select our armature second. So we click to select the mesh, hold shift, and then select the armature. And the order is important. With that, with the mesh and the bone selected in that, when I say bones, I mean the armature. With them selected in that order, we're going to hold Control, press P. This brings up our set parent menu, and what we want to do is look down to armature to form, not click there. We want to select with empty groups. So we're going to select with empty groups. The reason why we're doing this is because we're using with empty groups because we are doing hard surface rigging. We don't want this mesh to bend like it's an organic mesh. We want it to bend like it's metal. So that's why we use the with empty groups. Okay, so with us doing that, I'm going to press A to deselect. We need to do some manual work. Normally we would use automatic weights, and most of our work would already be done. Because we're doing with hard surface rigging, things are a little bit different, but they're not bad. So how do we do this? Okay, let's set up the head. So what we're going to do is we're going to click. That's my method of doing this. I'm rolling to zoom in. I'm going to click on our armature. I'm trying to click it. There we go. So we're going to click and then go to pose mode, right? So I'm clicking this bone in pose mode. Now Blender knows that I want to deal with this bone right now, right? Because I'm in pose mode. I'm selected on this bone. So what I'm going to do is I am going to left click on our mesh, right? I'm then going to hold Control, and then while holding Control, press Tab. This brings us into weight painting mode. Now that blue that you see is showing us that things aren't painted. I'm going to go to Options. So we're in weight painting mode. And then here in Options, see where it says Show Zero Weights? I'm going to select Active. So I want all of the things that aren't painted to show as being black, right? Okay, so this bone is still selected. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to left click here, and then I'm going to go to edit mode. So here in edit mode, we want to look to this menu over to the right. We want to click what looks like this triangle here. And then where we see this vertex group, see where this says spine.006? That's actually talking about this head bone right here. This weight that says 1, think of 1.000 as being 100% weight, which means move this totally when this bone moves. So what we're going to do is we're going to hover here, press L. We're on the face select, by the way. And we just want everything connected with this face to move. There we go. That looks pretty good. Let's roll in. So it looks like we have this head selected. So With this whole head selected, and with Blender knowing that we're working with this bone right here, we're going to select assign. So we assign 100% weight to that head bone. So I'm going to roll back. I'm going to press A to deselect. Now what we're going to do is click to go to object mode. We're going to click to select this head bone. Now we're going to press R to rotate twice. And now we can see our head is rotating. Our eyes are outside the head. And basically, see how slow this is moving? The reason why this is moving that slow is because there's a lot of geometry on this, right? What we're going to do is the head is fine. We're going to press A to deselect. We're going to click to go back to object mode. And what we are going to do is we're going to click on our mesh. I'm going to hold shift and then press D. So I duplicated our mesh. I'm pulling to the side. So we have a duplicate. I'm going to right click so that jumps right back into place. Now I'm going to press the M key. This brought up our move to layer menu. And then I'm going to select this layer right here. So I'm going to left click. And what I did was I made a duplicate of this mesh and I put it on this layer right here. The reason why I did that was we have geometry to make this mesh look, more detailed. I'll show you a method where we can keep the detail, the look of the detail, most of the detail, but not have this mesh moving slowly. Why is the mesh moving slowly? Currently the mesh is 587,456 triangles. That is not good as far as animation. So what we're going to do is click on our mesh and we're going to click on this wrench, which is our modifier menu. We've got all these modifiers on. The main thing that's giving us so much geometry is this subdivision surface here. Now we're having issues as far as moving our mesh because this armature is all the way on the bottom of the stack. However, we still can deal with this subdivision surface. So we have a duplicate of this mesh. So what we're going to do is we are going to click and get rid of this subdivision surface. So I'm going to press X. And now our geometry is down to 36,354. So this is manageable. And again, there's a way I'm going to show you where we can keep the detail, even though we just got rid of that, and you'll see. And another thing we want to do is move this armature up. So we'll click here and the armature move up. We'll click again to move the armature up. And now this is above the solidify as well as the bevel modifiers. Okay, so we currently have 36,357 triangles. However, we can take this bevel off as well. So we're going to click to get rid of the bevel, and that brought us down to 16,156 triangles. And now, with that done, we'll click back on the head. Let me zoom in. Or back on our armature. We'll go to pose mode. And then we'll press R twice like we did before. And now you can see the results. Okay, continuing on, this main mass of the body, not the arms, but the main mass, like everything. Like from here, all this will connect to this bone is what I'm currently thinking. So we'll press A to deselect. Let's click that bone there. Now let's left click on our mesh. When we left clicked on our mesh, that automatically took us into object mode. Now we're going to hold control. While holding control, press tab. And this took us into weight painting mode. And now from here, we're going to left click here. And then we're going to left click on edit mode. Okay, so here what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we're on face select, which we are. We're looking at dodging this right here and selecting all of the geometry with the exception of the arms above that. So we're hovering here, pressing L, pressing L, pressing L, hovering here, pressing L, pressing L, pressing L, 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 L. So with that geometry selected, we're going to go to what looks like our triangle right here. And this is that current bone. We have a weight of 1.000, and we want to select assign. So now this should be connected to the bone. So now that we have all of that mesh selected, we're going to press H to hide that. So now we're going to select what's left. So we'll hover here. We'll press L. Hover here, try to press L, 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 L. So then we'll select assign, then we'll press H, we'll press L. So this is connected. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold Alt and then left click here. We'll select assign. And what we're going to do with this selected is we're going to press H to hide that. So that lets us select just here. Press L and then select assign. Now we'll press H. And it looks like we have most of that upper part of the body. So now we'll hold Alt, then press H to bring all that geometry back. Then we'll press A to deselect. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go to object mode. We're going to click on our armature bone. We're going to press R to rotate on the X-axis. And it looks good. So I'm going to right click. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here, hold Control, press Tab. That took us into weight paint mode. I'm going to click here and then go to edit mode. And what we need to do is select the parts dealing with the arm. So I'm going to hover here, press L. And we want just this right here, not that right there. So I'll press L here, L. Because we have a mirror modifier on this mesh, what we do here will be done on the other side of the mesh as far as the other arm. So let's click assign. Okay, so now let's press H to see. I think we got it. So let's hold Alt, press H, press A to deselect. So what we're going to do is we're going to click near the bottom, select object mode, click on our armature. This took us right in the pose mode, which is fine. Now what we're going to do is click on our mesh, hold Control, press Tab. This took us to the weight paint mode. We're then going to left click near the bottom, select edit mode, and we're going to select this stuff. So we're going to hover here, press L, hover here, press L. We're going to select, whoops, I actually want this wrist. We're going to press L as well as L. L, L, L. We'll select assign. And we'll press H to hide that. So then we'll press L, L, L. Click assign. And then we'll press H to hide that. And that looks good. I think we got all that. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to left click near the bottom, go to object mode. We're going to click on our armature, press A to deselect, click on the hand, click on the mesh, hold control, press tab, go near the bottom, and then select edit mode. We're going to hold shift and then B, and then draw a zoom box to zoom in. We're going to left click, where we're going to hover here, press L, hover here, press L. We'll then click assign. And where I'm moving my mouse, your mouse determines like what is affected in Blender. So you want to have your mouse, sometimes I'll move my mouse over here, then I'll move it back. It's important where your mouse is at in Blender. So now I'm going to press H to hide. I'm going to hover over here, press L. I'm then going to select assign. I'm then going to come back over here and then press H. Looks good. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to click here, go to object mode. We're going to click on our armature. Here's our properties panel. We're going to scroll down. See, this is f index 01.l.001. This is 2 and this is 3. So we're going to try to remember these names. So here's 1, right? And these should be pretty much bunched up together. So what we're going to do to make things faster is we're going to click here, hold control. While holding control, press tab. We're then going to left click here. We're then going to go to edit mode. And then what we're going to do is we can see right here. So we're going to scroll down, and these are the other fingers going out. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So since we can see them, what we're going to do is we're going to hover here, make sure we're on face select. We're going to press L, press L. Okay, that is it there. So we're going to select assign, then press H, then we'll hover here, press L, select assign, then press H. So now what we're going to do is we're going to, knowing that this is index 0.02.L.001, we're going to click here, hover here. So that bone that I just said is this bone right here. See how they're all bunched up together? That's how we know. So that's what I'm doing. So instead of going, out of here, control tab, edit, all that, we're just knowing the bones here, we're using that to make things faster here. So with this selected, we hover here, we press L, we select assign, we press H to get that out of the way. So now we have this bone, that's f_index.03.L.001, or some context of those letters. So we click that, and then we hover here, then we press L, and we select assign. So then we press H, and now we know that that is assigned. So then this right here, we'll hover here, we'll press L, and we'll select assign, and then we'll press H. Okay, so now we're gonna left click here, go to object mode, click on our armature. We see which bone this is. This is .0.L. I'm just looking past that right there. So now we click here, we go to control tab, we go to edit mode, and then here it is right here. Now we can imagine here's .2, .3, which should be here as well as here. So with this selected, so this bone is connected to this, but this is the name of this bone, right? This mesh that's around here is what we want to be attached to that bone. So what we're going to do is hover here, press L, we select assign, so it's connected to the bone. Then we press H to get that out of the way. We have this piece here. We can see it because we hid the other mesh. We press L, and then we click assign, then we press H. And that part of the bone, that is good for that. So this is 1. So here's 2, which is this bone. So instead of going out, we click here, we hover here, we press L, then we press L, then we click assign, then we press H. We see this piece, so we press L, there we go, and we click assign, then we press H. So now we have this piece, so that's 3. So we click here, we hover here, we press L, click assign, then we press H. We hover here, press L, and then we click assign, then we press H. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go to object mode. We're going to click here, Control Tab, go to edit mode, and this is .01. If we scroll down, we can see the other fingers here. So we're going to hover here, press L, click assign, press H, hover here, press L, assign, press H. We're going to go to the next bone, hover here, press L, and then L, assign, and then H. Hover here and press L, assign, and then H. We're going to go to the third bone. Hover here, press L, assign, press H. Hover here, press L, assign, and then H. Okay, so now we're going to go to object mode. We're going to click here, hold Control, press Tab, then go to edit mode. Here's .1. So here's 2 and 3. These should be the bones that are grouped together. So what we're going to do is hover here, press L, assign, H, hover here, press L, assign, and then H. We're then going to click the next bone. We're going to hover here, press L, then L, assign, and then H. Hover here, press L, assign, and then H. We're going to click the next bone. We're going to hover here, press L, assign, and then H. Hover here, press L, assign, and then H. Okay, so we're going to go to object mode, click on the armature, click here, hold Control, press Tab, go to edit mode. Here's 1, there's 2 and 3. So we're going to hover here, press L, assign, press H, hover here, press L, assign, press H. Second bone, so we'll click here, hover here, press L, and then L, assign, and then H. Hover here, L, assign, then H. We'll go to the third bone, hover here, press L, assign, and then H. Hover here, press L, assign, and then H. Okay, and now with all of that done, we're going to hold Alt, press H, bring back our geometry, press A to deselect. Hold the middle mouse button, rotate. We're going to click here, go to object mode, click on our control for our fingers, and we're going to press R, and look at that. Very nice. Because we use the mirror modifier on our mesh, we should be able to press A. I'll hover here, hold Shift, press B, draw a zoom box, click here, and press R. Very nice. So let's see, R. Okay, some pieces, no problem. Did we get this yet? We didn't do that yet. Okay, so this right here shouldn't be that difficult. So we're going to click here. We'll click here. Hold Control, press Tab. Click here. Go to edit mode. And we actually can see these bones here. So we'll click here, press L, 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 as well as L. And then for this, we'll select sign. We'll press H to hide that. We'll hover here. We'll press L, sign. Press H to hide that. We'll click here, press L, sign. Press H to hide that. Okay, we're going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. We're currently on thigh. We're going to click on shin, which is this bone right here. We're going to zoom back. We're going to go near the bottom. We're going to click, go to wireframe mode. Hold the middle mouse button to rotate. We're going to press B for box select. We're currently on face select as well. So we're going to select of that geometry. We missed that right there. So we're going to hold B and then select again. Now we're going to hold Control and then press L. And now with that, we're going to go back near the bottom again. We're going to select a solid view, and then we're set for a sign. So we're going to select, we're set for shin. So shin.L is what we're currently selected on. So now we're going to left click on the sign, and then going to press H to hide that geometry there. We're going to hold Shift and the middle mouse button to pan up now. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. We'll zoom in. Let's click here, go to object mode. We'll click on our armature. So we want this bone. This is really the control bone here. So this is the bone we want, which is this, bone that has this location constraint on it. So what we're going to do is we're going to left click here, hold Control, press Tab, then go to edit mode. So that's that foot.L bone. So we're going to hover. I'll hover here, press L, 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 and then we'll select a sign. We'll then press H. And then now what we're going to do is we're going to click here, go to object mode, click here. So this is toe.L, which is what we want. We're going to click here, hold Control, press Tab, click here, and then go to edit mode. And then here in edit mode, we're going to hover here, press L, then select sign, and then press H. Looks good. Okay, we're going to zoom back, hold the middle mouse button to rotate, hold Shift and middle mouse button to pan down, hold Control and the middle mouse button to zoom in, hold Shift and the middle mouse button to pan. So what we're going to do is go back to object mode. We're going to click on our armature, click here, hold Control, press Tab, click here, go to edit mode. We're going to hover here, press L, select a sign, press H, hover here, press L, select sign, press H. Now we're going to click here, go to object mode, click our armature, click here, hold Control, press Tab, go here, select edit mode. And this is our spine.001. We're going to press L, L, L. We're then going to select a sign. We're then going to press H. We're going to hover here. We're going to press L. We're going to click a sign. Then we're going to press H. Okay, we're going to zoom back. we're going to hold Alt, press H to unhide all of our geometry. We're going to click here, go to object mode, click on our armature. Actually, let's click here and press G. And everything is moving. I'm going to go here. I'm going to turn on ambient occlusion just to make it a little bit easier to see. I'll press G. I'll press G and Y to move this out some. And I'll hold Alt, press G. Press G then Y. And I'm just looking at this in different poses. That's what I'm doing now. And what I think you can do if you're like, okay, that's hard to see what's going on, what we can do is we can actually split our screen, press T here, and then N here. While we press N, we'll go to display, we'll select only render, then press N to take this away. We'll click here, go to material. It didn't make it particularly easier, so we'll go back to solid. But basically what we can do is use this view here to see. We'll hover here, we'll press A to select everything, we'll hold Alt, then press R, then press G. So basically we can move here and then look there and see how, how things look. Alt R, then Alt G. So we'll try, and I'm just putting our transformer in different poses, and just again, seeing how everything looks. And with this, we can actually take these bones here. I'm holding Shift. And then we can go here, click copy, and then paste to the opposite side. Make this, press G, then Z. Bend down some. Bring this back. Rotate on the Z axis. There. I'm just trying to, get a look. See how this thing is looking. And for those other pieces that you see, press A to deselect. We'll deal with them. The pieces that when I click here and press G, that stuff, we'll also parent the eyes. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna make our transformer character bend down, and then what we're gonna do is click to go to edit mode. Now here in edit mode, you can see that our character stood back up. So what we can do is We'll go to object mode. There we go. Now when we click object mode, we're going to click on our actual mesh. We're going to click on our modifier tab. Now we're going to go into edit mode. You can see the character stands back up. However, when we go to, so we're clicked on our mesh, right? And our mesh has the armature on it, this armature modifier. We can click here and then here. So now in edit mode, our character is actually still bent down, and then this makes that easy for us to select here. Hold Control, press L, and then press X to bring up our delete menu and choose faces to delete. The same thing here. L, X to bring up our delete menu, we choose faces to delete. We'll hover here, L. Okay, maybe this isn't a piece. X, faces to delete. There we go. So I'm actually going to take these off. Click here, go back to object mode. Now let's click on our armature, click to pose mode, press A to select everything. So we deselect it, press A again, hold Alt, press R, then G, then press A to deselect. Okay, I'm gonna go to object mode. I'm gonna click on our mesh, press H, click on our armature, press H. I'm gonna hover here, hold Shift, press B, and then draw a zoom box to zoom into the eyes. Okay, I'm going to go to display, select front. I'm going to hold shift, press C. I'm going to hold shift and the middle mouse button to pan up. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to, with that there, I'm going to hold shift, press A. I'm going to go to armature and then select single bone. I'm then going to click, well, no, I'm going to go to edit mode. With the top of this bone selected, I'm going to hold shift, press S. This brings up our snap to menu. I'm going to choose selection of cursor offset. It looks like the bone disappeared. It didn't. I'm just going to scale down to the cursor, so I'm just going to push that out. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out of here, select the eye, hold shift, press S. Just a lot of shift S to snapping. If you're like, oh, what's going on? What's going on? I'm using snap a lot. It's basically what's going on. So I'm going to choose cursor to selected, right? I did that because I want to move this right to the center of the eye. So I'm going to click back on the armature. So now I have the 3D cursor here. I can select this armature and move this over. So I'm going to hold shift, press S. I'm going to choose selection to cursor offset. So there's our bone in the eye now. I want to be able to see the bone, so I'm going to go to our puppeteer button, click X-ray, so now we can see it. I'm going to go to the right view, hold shift in the middle mouse button to pan. And now I want this back piece to be right where this is at. So I'm going to click here, hold shift, press S, choose selection to cursor offset, and now that's set up just like that. So now I'm going to press A to deselect, click the whole bone. I'm going to go to change the name. I'm going to change this name to I_B.L, thinking I base basically. So now with that done, I'm going to hold shift, press D, right click. I made a duplicate by pressing shift D, and I am just making sure this has enough space. So I held shift D to pan. I just pushed it straight out. I'm going to name this I_target.L, then press enter. Okay, so with that done, these are in position, they're named. Now let's put constraints on this. So what we're going to do is we're going to left click near the bottom, go to pose mode, click the bone that's out the furthest in front first. The order is important. I'm going to hold shift, click the bone that's basically going to control the eye second. Now I'm going to hold shift. While holding shift, press I. This brings up our add IK menu. I'm going to select to active bone. I'm then going to go to our bone constraints and select a chain length of 1. Okay, so I'll press A to deselect. I'm going to go to edit mode. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press A to select our bones. I'm then going to go to Armature and then select Symetrisize, and very nicely they are duplicated. Okay, so now with that set up, I'm going to click here, hold Shift. While holding Shift, I'm going to click here. Now I'm going to hold Shift S. I'm going to choose cursor to selected because there was 2 bones selected. Our 3D cursor went right to the center. I'm going to press A to deselect. I'm going to hold Shift, press A. So now we have this right here, this new bone. I'm going to left click here. I'm going to name this eye target, then press enter. Okay, I'm going to press A to deselect. I'm going to click here, go to edit mode, press A to select. I'm going to go to Armature, select Symetrisize. The bones were copied and the names were, proper names were given to this as far as .R compared to .L over here, which is very nice. Okay, now I'm going to click here, hold Shift. While holding Shift, click here. I'm then going to hold Shift, press S. And this brought up our snap to menu. I'm going to choose cursor to selected. Because both of these bones are selected, the 3D cursor went right to the center. I'm going to hold Shift, press A. Brought in that bone right there. I'm going to press A to deselect. Click here, and then name this eye underscore target. Press enter to lock that in. Now I'm going to press A to deselect. I'm going to click here, hold Shift, click here, and then click here. Trying to click here. There we go. Now I'm going to, with the bone selected in that order, I'm going to hold Control, press P, and then select Keep Offset. So these bones are parented to that. And then now, with all of that done, I am going to click here and then go to Object Mode. Okay, what I'm going to do now is press A to deselect. I'm going to hold Alt, press H to bring back our other object. I'm going to press A to deselect. I'm going to click on our main mesh. I'm going to press H to hide that. I'm now going to click on this separate armature, which represents what we set up for the eyes. I'm going to hold Shift and then click our main armature. Then I'm going to hold Control and press J. So I joined these armature bones were in a separate armature. Now they're connected with this. Okay? So I'm going to press A to deselect. I'm going to zoom in. We're in object mode. I'm going to go to edit mode. And now we need to, set up the parent. So this is now one armature with this, okay? Okay, so what we're going to do now is click here, hold Shift, click here. And then while still holding Shift, left click here, hold Control, press P, and then select, our Make Parent menu popped up. We're going to select Keep Offset. I'm going to press A to deselect. These 2 bones are parented to this bone, so we can just click this bone here, hold Shift, then click that bone. The order is important. Hold Control, press P, and then select Keep Offset. Then press A to deselect. The reason why we did that was so that when the head bone moves, our eyes will move with the head bone. Okay, now we need to parent the eyes to actual bones. So what we can do is click here, go to pose mode. We'll click on this bone, zoom in. I'll click on the eye. I'll hold Shift, and then while holding Shift, I'll click here. Now what happened is we clicked here. Blender knew we were dealing with that bone. So we went to object mode, we re-clicked here, and now because Blender knows the order that we selected this in, it knows that we want to parent this eye to this bone. So what we're going to do is hold Control, press P, and this brings up our Set Parent to menu. We're going to select bone. So we're going to press A to deselect. Now we're going to do the same thing over here. Click here, hold Shift, click here, and then hold Control, press P. This brings up our Set Parent menu. We're then going to select bone. I'm then going to press A to deselect. Okay, now I'm going to zoom back. I'm going to left click here, go to object mode. This is still selected orange because Blender's just saying this is active. I'm going to hold Alt, press H. Now I'm going to click on our armature. I'll zoom in over here, hold Shift, hover here, hold Shift, press B, draw a zoom box. You can see our eyes. Oh, we're clicked on our armature here. Okay, now we're clicked on, now we're re-clicked on. I'm going to click here, go to pose mode, click this bone here. So now you can see that our eyes are tracking, which is excellent. I'm going to right click now. And looks good. I'm going to press A to deselect. Okay, and just like before, I'm going to click here on our eye target. We can make this easier to control by scrolling up. We're in our properties panel, and what we want to do is lock the Z location down because this eye bone doesn't need to move front or back. And then this rotation, all these rotations axes, we don't need these because it doesn't need to rotate. So now when we have this selected, we can press G and we'll be able to move our eyes and have better control. So I'm going to right click, then I'm going to press A to deselect. Okay, we're almost through this. I told you I would show you how to get the detail back. It's actually fairly easy to do. I'm going to click here. I'm going to select UV image editor. And what we're going to do is we're going to click on our main mesh, right? We're going to click near the bottom. We're going to go to edit mode. We're going to make sure we're on face select. We're going to press A to select everything. We're going to press U. Then we're going to select, don't let this concern you. This is from before. Work I was doing outside of the tutorial. So let me press X. And this right here is a UV of this. The way I got that was just pressing U and then selecting Smart UV Project. And this is Blender's way of unwrapping your mesh. It tends to work fairly well actually with mechanical things like this. So we just unwrap this, or Blender unwrap this for us. So now what we want to do is go to New. We're going to click here. We're going to name this Normal. Press Enter. We're going to go to Width. We're going to change this to 2048. We're going to go down here to Height. We're going to change this to 2048. We're going to go to this color. It really doesn't matter, but I'm going to move that up to gray. We're going to select OK. So we have this here, right? Okay, we're going to look for this here. So let's go, let's press A to deselect and click here, go to object mode. Because our mesh is connected to our meta rig here, we have to click this plus button. And here is our mesh right here. Select this. We're going to double click this and we're going to name this low and then press enter. So remember that this mesh is right here on this layer. Now I'm going to click this layer here. This is our high poly mesh here. So I'm going to click here. And I am going to, you can see our name right here. So I'm going to double click this and I'm going to name this high. Okay, so now I'm going to click here. When you look here, you can see that this is 15,000 triangles. And then I'm going to click here. You can see this is 586,304 triangles. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go back to the low poly mesh here. Okay, so what we're going to do is hold shift and then while holding shift select the high poly models layer. We're going to hover here, press A. We're going to go to what looks like our camera, scroll down to where we see bake. Normally this would say full render. We're going to click here, change this to normals. This looks like it says selected to A. This really means selected to active. We're going to put a check mark right there. We're then going to go to the top, select first the high poly, hold shift. While holding shift, select the low poly. And then with the meshes selected in that order, we're going to select bake. Okay, what this is this is a normal map. A normal map, without getting too much into it, a normal map allows you to basically take most of the detail of a high poly mesh and then make it look like a low poly mesh has that. When you look here, you see this image, this little asterisk symbol means this isn't saved. This normal map is very important. I recommend you click image, select save image. And then I recommend that you make a folder. I've done this previously. You would click here, you would name that folder textures. You would then double click into that folder. That's the folder we're currently into. And then you would just click save as image. You can just make sure you know where your normal map is at. If you click here, you can actually see there's the normal map. And you can see here that we're inside of a folder named textures. Again, important thing is you just know where the normal map is at, okay? So you're going to click save as image to save it. I already have it saved right here, so I'm not going to save it. I'm going to click cancel. Make sure that you have this saved though. And now with that done, we no longer need that high poly mesh. What we can do is click here on our low poly mesh, and then we're going to click this material here. I had a material here, so I'm going to click this minus to take it away. I'm going to click new. I'm going to select textures here, select new. I'm going to come down to open. I'm going to go to textures, click here. Here's my normal map. I'm going to left click that and select open image. I'm going to scroll down until I see image sampling. I'm going to click here. See where it says normal map? So we're in image sampling. This is important. Image sampling, okay? Make sure that you're in image sampling, this menu, and then in image sampling, you're going to put a check mark next to normal map, okay? You're going to scroll down. Once you scroll down, you're going to see this influence. You don't need the color. So you're going to unclick that, and then you're going to put a check mark next to normal right here. Okay, with all of that, you're like, okay, what's the deal? You don't see anything different. You won't see anything different here in solid mode. You need to click here and go to material mode. And now here in material mode, a lot of the detail that we had on the other mesh is on this. So basically, if you really want to see what I mean, when I click here to go back to solid, see how hard this looks here? How hard this looks here. Now watch when I go to material. And now you can see, and it's a little difficult to see because there's a different color, but normals are great. They are a way of, let me click here. So come back here and I'll change this to materials. We have our normals. So normals are a way that you can have your, I'm going to press R to rotate. You can have your rigs, but still keep a lot of the detail of your rigs. Okay, suppose you're like, I'm concerned about losing the normal file. One of the things you can do is you can click File, go down to External Data, and then you can select Pack All into Blend. If you click this, you will be able to have your normal map travel around with your Blender file. So if you click this, I still would recommend you keep the normal map, but if you're concerned about misplacing it, you can click this and you should be able to have the normal map inside of your Blender file. And if you're like, what are you talking about? What I'm talking about is Blender references that image file to give you this detail. So unless you click that pack into Blender file, you need to know where that normal's at so that Blender can look at the image and basically give you the detail that you see here. Okay, we just want to test out our rig and make sure it's everything appears to be working correctly. So I'm just posing him some, or to rotate on the y-axis right here to position those knees. Bent the hand here, so if I want to do have the other hand bend quickly, I can just click here. I'll press A to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hover here, hold shift, press B, draw the zoom box, zoom in here, click here. Press R to rotate. There's an issue here. For now, we're going to fix this quickly. We're going to click on our mesh. We're going to go to edit mode. We're going to hover here. This is the point isn't parented. We're going to press L to select that. Then we're going to press X to bring up our delete menu, then choose faces to delete. I'm now going to click here, go back to object mode. Then I'm going to click here, and we do have a space there, but for this will do for now. We still have work to do as far as not for this tutorial, but for our transformation, actually changing from vehicle mode to the robot mode you're currently looking at. Okay guys, that's it for the tutorial. For all of those of you out there who like the videos on this channel and reshare them, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And for those of you who are new to this channel, if you like the videos on this channel, you would like to see more, please subscribe and thank you for viewing.